Hey guys, in this video we're going to take a look at asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction in organisms. So asexual reproduction is defined as a type of reproduction in which a new organism is produced from one parent. And therefore, since there's only one parent, all of the genetic information is identical to that parent. Now keep in mind that when we're talking about reproduction of organisms, we're talking about plants as well as animals. So we've got plants producing new plants, animals producing new animals. But in asexual reproduction, we only have one parent. Now, since all of that genetic information is coming from just one parent, all of the offspring are going to be identical, the same as that one parent. So, here's a visual for asexual reproduction. Here we have a worm, okay? If you've got one worm parent, that means the offspring have no other option than to look exactly like the parent, as they do in this picture right here. One parent, offspring are the same, because all of that genetic information is coming from just one. There's no other outside input, okay? So they are the same as the parent. So asexual reproduction, same as the parent. It's types of organisms that undergo asexual reproduction. Now, you might have already figured this out. They've got to be pretty simple organisms. So if we're talking about animals, here we have a starfish, okay, or a planaria, okay, which is kind of looks like a worm. Okay, these types of organisms are able to go through asexual reproduction with a type of reproduction we call regeneration. Okay, regeneration. You probably heard of regeneration before. So if I take one of these little arms and I cut it off of that starfish, then the original starfish is going to grow a new arm, and the arm is going to grow a new body. So I would have two starfish. If I take this planaria right here and I cut him in half, okay, the top half, the head half, is going to grow a tail, and then the tail half is going to grow a head. So I go from having one to two. This is a type of regeneration, asexual reproduction. Other types of reproductions type of asexual reproductions that we have, okay, vegetative propagation. It's similar to regeneration, but here, if I cut off a part of this plant, okay, I cut a part off, and I plant it in soil, it'll create a whole new plant. Okay, so if you take a limb of only certain plants, not all plants, but you take a limb of certain plants and you cut that limb off, and you plant that limb into soil, that branch into soil, it'll create a whole new plant. We call that vegetative propagation. Okay, budding is another type of asexual reproduction. Now, budding, as you can see in our example with this hydra, which is a really, really simple animal. Okay, you have a little bud, okay, or a little part that starts to grow out of the side of the parent. Okay, that little bud gets a little bit larger as it grows out of the side of the parent, until it finally, okay, gets big enough to where it just pinches off and creates a whole new, organism. So this is called budding. And then we have binary fission. Binary fission. Now, this is a type of reproduction that plants would undergo, bacteria would undergo. So in binary fission, here, we have a bacterial cell, and then you gradually see that bacterial cell is going to start to divide into two, what we call daughter cells, or two new cells. Okay? And that is binary, bi meaning two, and then fission, which means to divide. So divide into two. So these are all types of asexual reproduction. A meaning the opposite of, so asexual reproduction, the opposite of sexual reproduction. Okay, you have one parent, just one parent, and it creates the offspring, and all the offspring are identical. I mean, it would just be as if you undergo asexual reproduction and you had a child, you had a baby, they would look identical to you. They would look exactly like your twin, except it would be your offspring. It would be your son or your daughter. Okay, that's what asexual reproduction is. Now, asexual reproduction doesn't necessarily happen in complex organisms. Okay, it usually only happens in real simple organisms. Okay, such as the bacteria or the planaria or the starfish. The more simple it is, that's where we find asexual reproduction. All right, now sexual reproduction. Okay, sexual reproduction requires two parents. Okay, so there's two parents in this. All right, so here I have parent 1 and parent 2, and parent 1 and parent 2 obviously different from each other. And then when we have two sets of genetic information coming together, then the offspring are not going to look like the same of either parent. They're half one parent and half the other. Okay? That's why you look a little bit different from your parents. You're half mom and you're half dad. You got some of the traits from mom and you got some of the traits from dad. You're a combination of, and you always get those stories. Oh, you look so and so, just like your mom and your dad, or you have your mom's eyes, or your dad's nose, or whatever that may be. It's because you get half of that genetic information from mom, half from dad, but it does mean that you are unique. Okay, you're not identical to one or the other. You may look a little bit more like one or the other, but you're not identical because you're half and half. So we have mom, we have dad, and then we have these unique offspring. They're all different. And that's why you don't look like your brothers or your sisters either, because they have a different combination. They're half mom and half dad as well, but a different combination of that genetic material. All right. So sexual reproduction, types of sexual reproduction. Well, we have sexual reproduction that happens in plants. Okay, you probably didn't think about that, but sexual reproduction does happen in plants, where we have reproductive cells from one plant going to the reproductive cells of another plant. Okay, and that's where bees come in and pollination comes in, because bees take that pollen from one plant and they go and pollinate other plants. And then those plants then produce seeds. Those seeds then produce new plants. And that's how we get variations in color of different colored flowers and different kinds of plants, is because of that sexual reproduction. Half of it coming from one plant parent, the other half of the genetic information coming from the other plant parent, and it gives us a new unique plant parent. Okay, and then we have sexual reproduction in animals, obviously. Okay, and then we have two parents, so we got half the genetic information from mom, half the genetic information from dad, okay, coming together to form a new organism. Okay, and obviously us being animals, we undergo sexual reproduction. Again, half genetic information from mom, half dad, coming together to form a completely new organism, a diverse organism, one that does not look like either parent. Okay, it's very unique. So remember, asexual reproduction, asexual, just one parent, and all of the offspring, all the babies look exactly the same as the parent, because all that genetic information is coming from that one parent and is being passed down to the offspring. Versus sexual reproduction, we have two parents, okay, and we get half the genetic information from mom, half the genetic information from dad, okay, meaning the offspring are half and half. They're half mom, half dad, and therefore they're unique because they're a combination of the two. All right. If you need to, obviously go back and rewind, and we'll see you next time.